Hey everybody, I'm Ken Brant, and I'm an artist. So for today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I painted a French cafe scene, in particular this one right here. And I've done a French cafe scene in some earlier videos. It was this one here. This is when I was painting. I did a watercolor of it first, and then I painted it again in oil because I wasn't pleased with the watercolor painting. So I redid it in oil, and we did a video on that, and I showed the difference between the two. And some people like the watercolor over the oil. Some people like the oil over the watercolor. So really, it's just a preference of, you know, what you like as opposed to what anybody else's likes. It's amazing how, you know, I think something isn't that great and other people think it's fabulous. So yeah, we're going to be working on this particular scene. It's one I chose because I liked the lighting effect that was on it. There were some sky holes coming through from a tree that's not even in the picture. And I like the effect that it had on the canopy and the sidewalk. Plus two, I want to continue practicing on working on people and figures on a smaller scale, kind of, you know, a very loosely impressionistic type look to it. So I wanted to practice on that, so that's why I chose this as well. And yeah, so I sped the video up a little bit, not a lot, because it took me about 3.5 hours to paint the painting. I'm not a fast painter. It takes me between 3 to 4 hours on average to do a smaller size painting. Some people can do it faster than that. I'm not one of those people. But nobody's gonna, you know, I'm not gonna watch a 3.5 hour video of someone painting, so I did speed it up a little bit and got it down to less than an hour. You can still follow along on the brush techniques in that. It doesn't speed it up so you can't follow it. So you can still see how I painted the painting. And while I have you here, I'd like to do a shout out to Stefan Baumann. He is my coach. You have a coach? Yes, I have a coach. I have a painting coach, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's everybody should have one. Tiger Woods has a coach, and he is the greatest golf player in the world. Michael Jordan had a coach. He's the greatest basketball player in the world. The greats have coaches because you need someone to remind you of bad habits. You need someone to help you improve on what you're already good at. So yeah, Stefan Baumann, he's my coach. He is a prolific wildlife painter. He is hugely known for his plein air painting, and he's very good at what he does, and he has helped me become very good at what I do. My painting has improved 10 times from where I started before I had him as a coach. So I highly recommend you check out Stefan Baumann. He has many videos on YouTube. I'll leave a link below for you to check him out. And without further ado, let's get to the painting.
Perhaps you've noticed on some of my previous videos that I'll start a painting different ways. Sometimes I'll do the underpainting, sometimes I don't do the underpainting. Here I chose to cover the canvas with some raw umber, and I just brushed it on there, covering my drawing, which I did with a charcoal pencil. So when I did this, I noticed some of the charcoal was moving in along with the paint, but that's not a problem because I know the oil paint's going to cover that right up, and I wasn't too concerned about that. So that's what I did here, and I tried to put a little texture in the paint with using the paper towel. So sometimes if you leave any spaces open where that color can come through in the final painting, a lot of times when you put some texture on it, that also comes through and adds a little interest to the painting. I'm not sure if any of that really showed through at the end of this. I don't believe it did, but regardless, I like to put it in there. So I started with my darkest darks, and this is just really just raw umber. So I was kind of like trying to do sort of like a halfway underpainting, halfway not. I still wasn't sure exactly how I was going to do this, and I like to experiment with different ways of beginning my paintings to really see what's going to work best. Sometimes an underpainting isn't what you want to do for a painting, sometimes it is. A lot of times I'm not 100% sure exactly how I want to approach it, so I try different things, and never be afraid to do that. It's always good to just try something out. If it doesn't work, no big deal. Just try something different next time. So I put some raw umber for the darkest areas, and then I really wanted to get the biggest part of the picture in the painting is that awning. So I figured I'll just fill that in first. So the colors I'm using here is a cobalt turquoise and a phthalo turquoise, kind of like mixed together. I really didn't know which color turquoise would look best, so I kind of mixed them. I played around with them. Here the top part of the awning is more straight cobalt turquoise than anything. I added a little white in there because it is a lighter value on my reference photo. And then for the darker areas, I took the cobalt turquoise and I added a little Payne's gray to it. Payne's gray has a blue undertone to it, so I thought that would darken up really nice. And it does. I think it looked good in there. So basically I was just working on the awning, and then I decided I'm going to attack this left side of the painting here. There's some building structures in the background, and I need them to look, you know, kind of distant away, so I have to put a little atmosphere to it. So a lot of times when we do atmosphere, we want to add a bluish color to it, but I had a lot of blue, you know, turquoise in that awning, so I thought that really wouldn't work all that great here. So what I'm working with is some yellow ochre and some cadmium yellow and a mixture of raw umber inside or with the yellow ochre to kind of, you know, darken that up in areas, and then I just went with white in to lighten it up in other areas. So that's basically what I'm doing here. And you can see, you know, it doesn't matter if I got into the awning area a little bit. I did, which I wanted to do, because you don't want to leave any lines or gaps. So I'm usually not too afraid to move right into, you know, another area with my colors. It can all be fixed and straightened out. Anything that blends together, sometimes it looks nice, sometimes it does not. But it can be easily fixed either way. So I'm putting in some yellow ochre in some areas, lighter areas that are underneath the awning. And I knew this area was going to be a little tricky because there's some windows inside underneath this awning, and I wanted them to, I wasn't really too sure how I was going to make them look like windows as opposed to just some dark objects, some dark, you know, rectangles underneath the awning. But in the end, it all worked out pretty good. I like the way it showed up. And the other thing that I wanted to concentrate on was the people. I made sure that there was a lot of people in this particular painting because it's something I need to work on. This is a 9x12, so the people aren't very big, and I wanted to go for an impressionistic feel on this particular painting. So the people I knew weren't going to be rendered perfectly. They were going to be, you know, kind of broken up in detail. You know, you weren't going to see their faces. We're going to know just from looking at that, yes, they are people, and they're seated in front of this cafe. But you know, any recognition as a, you know, who they are or anything, you would never see any of that. So here I am. This is a mixture for the flesh color. I used a mixture of phthalo green and alizarin crimson, and then I lightened it up with just some titanium white, and I'm just putting in the faces and all the different places that there are people in this particular painting. And there are some people in there that you don't see their faces, you know, their heads turned away, so I wasn't too concerned about them. One of my big issues when it's not an issue, but it's something I'm always thinking about is, you know, the color hair. I mean, everybody has different colored hair, but how do you make it look like it's not just a blob, a dark blob sitting on someone's head? So I'm always concerned about how I'm going to approach that, but basically, you know, I go with different shades of brown. I'll add some yellow ochre in there to kind of lighten it up for more blondish hair, and then you just put a little highlight in there, and it seems to work out pretty good that way. For the lighter areas on the clothes, I pretty much just use some titanium white with a very light touch of cerulean blue. And then here for these other shirts, you can see I added more cerulean blue. And then for the darker clothes, I've used some different shades of Payne's Gray with some cerulean blue. I really like using cerulean blue for a lot of different things. It's a great color to work with. It's when you're working with your blues, cerulean blue. If you're looking for a cooler blue, cerulean blue is cooler in temperature than ultramarine blue. So I like to utilize cerulean for that purpose. Now you can see on the sidewalk I started putting in some, you know, it's kind of a grayish color, and the lighter areas, those are going to be rendered a little bit better as those sky holes from coming through a tree. Obviously there's a tree off the side of the picture that you don't see that's creating some sky holes, and that's what I'm putting on the awning now, is some sky holes. And that's all I did. Is I used the mixture of the turquoise and some titanium white, and I used that to create the sky holes. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to go in there and change that or not, because as you can see, it did give a slightly chalky appearance. And there are always two things that you're always trying to avoid when you're doing a painting. It's making your painting look chalky in any way, or making your painting look muddy in any way. And so a lot of times your painting will become chalky if you are mixing a cool color with another cool color. And titanium white is a cool color. Even though it's white, it's, as far as whites go, it's the cooler of the whites. So it will create a chalky appearance on a lot of things. So I may go in there with just some straight phthalo turquoise, and because that's a very light turquoise to begin with, I may go over those sky holes and see how that looks. I'm still not sure on that yet. The jury's out. I may do it, I may not. If I do and I don't like it, I'll just go back over it, no big deal. And a lot of times, like I was saying, you want to avoid, you know, a muddy look to your paintings, and that's usually when you're mixing a warm color with another warm color. It'll tend to get muddy on you. So those are two things that you'll always want to pay attention to, is what colors you're mixing together, because it will create a certain effect, and you may like it or you may not, depending on what the colors that you're using are. Now for this part here, where these people are sitting, there's a lot going on there. It's very abstract, but there's a lot of darks and lights in there, you know, underneath the seats and that, and it's none of it is detailed. So, you know, how I was going to approach that, I mean, just, you know, do you put a dot here, do you put a dab there? And basically, yes, that's almost the answer to the question. But you also want to, you know, you just don't want to make it give it an appearance that there's just, you know, there's no sense to it. So you have to pick and choose where you're placing these colors to fill in the blank spots of the canvas. And a lot of times I'll just say, okay, well, whatever it is that's there is a darker color. I'll just put that color in there, and a lot of times it just works out, and that's what I'll do. So I did notice that underneath the canopy, there are some areas that are much darker. So you want, like for example, underneath the canopy, you want that area to look a lot darker than the lower part of what's underneath the canopy. Like where the people are in the background, you'll want that to be slightly lighter than what's directly underneath the canopy. So I mixed my raw umber with some Payne's Gray and darkened that up, and I made sure that that was directly underneath the canopy because I knew that area was going to be the darkest area of the painting. And then everything else from there is going to be lighter. That will be the darkest spot, and my lightest area should be would be on the left hand side. That is where the sun is directly hitting these buildings in the background, so that will actually be my lightest area. And I would sprinkle some lighting effects across the painting, because as you can see, there's sky holes of supposedly some sunlight coming through a tree. So I would want some of that effect, that light effect, hitting like the shoulders of the people that are sitting there, so that, you know, it kind of brings your attention from that corner down to the center area of the painting and kind of off to the right. And so that was kind of what I was trying to go for there. And you'll notice that when I get near the end of the painting. So basically, I'm just putting in some more details here on this building. I wanted to, you know, it has to look like there's a building there, and there's some railings, and there's some, you know, some eaves and things underneath the porches, and you know, you got some windows, and you want to show some reflections in there, so it kind of comes across as a window. So and it's a lot of little stuff. So how do you make that stuff look like it's supposed to? Well, all you can do is, what I do is, you know, I'll take my reference photo and then I squint my eyes and I just look at the blurry image and I say, okay, I see a couple little areas of light, you know, a lighter color. So I'll try to match that color up, and I will put those, I'll just take my paintbrush and I will just dab into that color and just kind of make, like if I see a blurry dot, then I just make a dot in that same area. And then if I see a blurry dark spot, then I'll just take that darker color and just put that in that area, you know, so it matches what I'm seeing off the reference photo, but it's not any detail of any kind. And I'll show you that here on this railing that I'm doing on this porch. It is, if you look up close on it, it is just a bunch of squiggly little lines that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. If you looked at it up close, you would go, well, I don't even know what that is. But back, 6 feet, when you're looking at the painting, it looks like a porch railing, like there's some sort of intricate design in the metalwork. But in actuality, I did not paint that in there. It's just a bunch of squiggly little lines. It's the illusion that we create with the paintbrush and the colors, and that always fascinates me. How a lot of times I'll paint something, and then when I'm done, I'll look at it and go, wow, I can't believe I just did that. It looks so good, and yet, like I say, if you get up close to it, you'll be like, I can't make any sense of what that is. It's amazing. It's one of the reasons I love doing what I do. So here I am, and I'm working with this. It's kind of like a rigger brush, and I'm still trying to figure out the best way to utilize these brushes with the oil paint. These brushes don't have a very long life, I've noticed. A lot of times the hairs come out of them, and they get thinner and thinner and thinner to the point where you almost can't use them, especially these longer rigger brushes. And so I might get a hold of some shorter ones and see if they last a little bit longer. So here you can see what I'm talking about in this railing. It's just, from afar it looks like, oh, there's all kinds of little, it must be some sort of design in the metalwork or anything, but in actuality it's just a bunch of dots. So for the greenery that's up there, that's pretty much I use some permanent green and some permanent green light, and when I put some highlights on that shrubbery, I use some cadmium yellow to lighten it up for the highlights, and for the darker areas of the greenery I just added a little raw umber to it, because the raw umber still keeps it green, but it really makes it a nice darker color. You can see there, my rigger brush, I kind of went a little too far with it. I didn't realize it. I just made a black line on that canvas, but no big deal. Just cover it up. Oil paints are very forgiving that way. So I wasn't too happy with the color that I had on there. It needs to be darkened up a little bit, that awning. So I went with a stronger version of the cobalt turquoise. And then I also integrated that color into the edges of the canopy. You can see there I darkened that up. That cobalt turquoise, I darkened it up, and I thought it was just a nicer color. I really liked it. Now I had written, there were some words, the name of this restaurant or this cafe is the Les Deux Margot, and I had those letters written on there in the charcoal, and I just painted right over them. So I was a little concerned I wasn't going to be able to properly put that wording in there, but I just, it's an impressionistic type style, so I figured, if it looks a little funky, so be it. I think it'll add some interest to the painting. And here I am putting more of those sky holes back in there that I covered up. And you're just trying to mimic, how they would look. And a lot, like what I realized is you want to really fade those edges out of the sky holes, and it kind of gives it, that a better look. But again, I went with the titanium white and the mixture of the phthalo turquoise, and it does look chalky, but I'm not sure. I mean, if you look in real life at how these sky holes look on something, sometimes it does look chalky, and I mean, if that's the effect that it gives, then this is what you want. It really comes down to what pleases you as the creator of this, of your painting. Say, hey, I made that choice, that this is how it's going to look, and I like it, and I'm going to keep it that way. So here's what I was talking about, where you're just adding just kind of, you know, there's some it's a detail, but it's not anything, you know, recognizable in any way, shape, or form. You just put it in there and just kind of fills the space. Now here I am with the darker green going across this greenery that's coming across the top of the awning and on the porch. And there is the permanent green mixed with the cadmium yellow for the highlights. So here I am putting a little bit more detail in this building area in the background. I kept looking at it thinking it still doesn't quite come off as, you know, I want it to look, you know, when you look at it at first glance, it should read building. And I kept looking at it thinking, well, you know, it's not yet. It's not quite there yet. So I figure a few more lines here, a few more lines there, and we'll have it right where we need to be. Yeah, and for this sign, which I'm not really sure 100% what this sign is, it's sort of like a stop sign, but it's not quite. It just has like this minus sign on it. And I had some quinacridone magenta in there initially, and I wasn't too crazy about how that looked. So I went with just cadmium red. That seemed to look a little bit better. And I was able to darken that up with some alizarin cruising, you know, much darker red for the darker areas on that sign, and I thought it came out good. So that is, to be honest with you, that is the only red in this whole painting, is that one little sign. That's it. Everything else is blues, greens, yellows, browns. That's the only red, that one little sign. So here I'm working on the shading on this awning. You know, just kind of blending it in, kind of make it look like it's, you know, so there's no hard edge there. And then I needed to put in some shading on the under part of this awning here. And that'll go all the way across. Because there is a, you know, there's supposedly a metal pole in there that's kind of supporting that all up. So you have to kind of put that in there. You know, give a suggestion of it anyway, and that's really all everything is here. It's just merely a suggestion of what I'm trying to achieve, because I'm thinking if this was like a, I don't know what, a 4 foot by 6 foot painting, then this would all be, you know, you would be able to make out everything that you're putting on there as far as detail, what it is. But when you work on these smaller paintings like this, you just kind of have to give a suggestion of it. A lot of times, you know, you're just splashing some color in there and hoping that it looks somewhat like what you want it to look like. And you can see I'm putting in some details on the awning here. Now for the shaded area, when I was putting yellow in there, I let that mix with the color that's there in the shaded area. This is the benefit of working with it when it's wet on wet. And it will darken up the lighter color that you're using, so it actually looks like it's blending into that shaded area. And same with the lighter side, like on the right hand side where the awning is, the yellow mixes with that really light color. And that brightens it up to a point where it looks like, you know, it also is brighter than the rest of it. And here I am trying to put in these letters, and basically I just you just put them in, and they're not perfect, but they look great. For how I wanted this painting to look, that impressionistic type style, they don't need to be perfect. At no point ever does it ever have to be perfect, unless that is the focal point of your painting. Then yes, you would want it to look perfect. But in this case, it doesn't need to. I mean, this is an actual real French cafe that exists in the real world, and I have no question in my mind that when somebody looks at this, they're going to go, oh yeah, I know where that is. I've seen that, based on what I have painted here. So here I am darkening up these areas underneath the awning. I really did need to make sure that was the darkest area of the painting. So I kept going over it, making sure it's darker and darker. But eventually, just without putting in straight black, which I did not, that's the darkest you'll be able to get it. So here I am putting in some darker shades at the top and leaving the lighter shades at the bottom, just to kind of give you an idea that yes, there is some sunlight that's coming in, some indirect sunlight that's coming in, and it is touching the bottom of that area. So you have to show that to kind of give it any kind of atmosphere, because even in a close-up picture, you're working with atmosphere, and the atmosphere is going to dictate to you what's up close and what's far away. So on these windows, there was some, I noticed there was a gray, like a lightish gray color that kind of went around these windows, and that kind of gave it that impression that there was some glass there. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to give it that appearance, and I think it went pretty well. The way it came out, I liked it. I wouldn't change the way I put the effect in there. I think it came out really nice. And this is another area where I was looking at my reference photo and squinting. And I'm pretty much just like, if I saw like a blurry square, bright area, then I would try to mimic that with my brush. I would just put in a square, bright area in that same spot. It didn't have to be perfectly in the same spot, but it had to, be somewhat, in the same area. And it gives the appearance of what's in the reference photo. It really works out nice that way. So yeah, I use a lot of Payne's Gray. In fact, my tube is almost empty. I'm going to have to get another tube of it pretty soon here. I think I probably have maybe 2 or 3 more paintings left out of that tube, and then I'll have to replace it. I do like to use the Payne's Gray. It does have a blue undertone to it. I could achieve the same color with, I might be able to achieve, I would have to play around with it. I think ultramarine blue and some titanium white is just going to give you a light blue. But then I think if you put some raw umber in there and mixed it with the ultramarine blue, I think you could get a very, very Payne's Gray looking color. So yeah, I could probably mix it myself, but it's so much easier to have it just come right out of the tube, because I like the way it looks on its own, so I don't have a problem with that. If you want to do it like A lot of times what I'll do is I'll use a Payne's gray in one area, and then right next to it I'll use ivory black and white, which makes a totally different gray. And a lot of times those two grays next to each other, they look absolutely wonderful. They give you a really nice effect. Here I am putting in some more areas of skin, which again is just a mixture of phthalo yellow green, and alizarin crimson, and I got some titanium white, and then I might add a little yellow ochre in there to kind of yellow it up a little bit in some spots. Here I am putting in some hair, and really all I'm using there is just the raw umber, because raw umber is a really nice dark brown, and I'll use that kind of mostly for most of the hair, except for some blondish areas, like I said before. Just mix in some yellow ochre, and that'll lighten it up. And just going over some detail here. You'll notice that I still don't have all the canvas completely covered, and this painting is getting close near completion, and that's not the way I usually work. I usually like to cover the canvas completely with some sort of local color and then start going over it and putting in some detail. But here, this was such a busy area where these seats are and these people are sitting that it just it really took me some time to figure out where I wanted to put some of these colors and how they were going to best look in this very busy setting. Here I am putting some highlights on these chairs, kind of bring them out a little bit so they kind of look like chairs. To be honest with you, I didn't really, until I started finishing, putting in some details on these chairs, I really didn't think this particular area looked anything like what I wanted it to until I started doing that. The chairs really did fill in the scene nicely. Kind of gave it that, that look when you look at it, you're gonna go, oh, I know what that is. It's a bunch of people sitting in some chairs in front of a cafe. Before you put the colors in on the chairs, it was still kind of like, not really sure what that is. From a distance, you wouldn't be able to tell. It didn't read well. See, now, like for example, what I was talking about, like there was some sort of purse or a bag or something in the reference photo sitting on this chair. I threw it in there, but basically it's just a blob, and you put a little highlight on it, and it just reads as, okay, you don't know exactly what it is, but it reads as something sitting on that chair, and that's exactly how you want it to look. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to show it to be exactly 100% whatever it is. You just have to give a suggestion of it. And the painters the impressionists, they were masters at that, just utilizing different colors of light and dark, and they were able to really give you the impression of what it was they were trying to paint. So yeah, like I put in their shoes, but they looked very dark, so then I went back over them and lightened them up a bit. I don't want the shoes to be the thing that draws your attention to the painting, so I had to make sure that their value was somewhat similar to the rest of the scene. So here I need to work on the sidewalk a little bit. I needed to make sure I put those sky holes in there because I want them to be on the sidewalk just like they are on the canopy. And because that to me was important. The one thing that drew me to this particular reference photo was the effect of light on both the sidewalk and the canopy. So I wanted to make sure that those two elements were in this painting. And I think that also brings this painting together too. The fact that you have these sky holes on the sidewalk and then you have the sky holes up on top. It just kind of ties it all together. I think it looks great. Again, notice here, you know, these chairs, like I'm just putting in, I'm just putting in a line. You know, you put a line in for a chair leg and ta-da, it's a chair. And here I am putting in some highlights on some of the shirts and stuff. I mean, you know, because these people aren't directly in the sun. They're in, you know, obviously they're indirectly in the sun, but there's some of those sky holes I would think would come through and sit on, you know, one of their shoulders or, you know, maybe on the top of their head or their leg or something. So I wanted to make sure I put a little bit of that in there. And it might be not anything that anybody sees right away, but you know, if you look at the picture long enough, you know, these things come through, and that's what I think it makes it a beautiful painting. Yeah, there's this guy, this waiter in the background. Now, even in the reference photo, I cannot tell. He's got something in his hands. I can't tell what it is, but it's something. And I believe that there's a towel coming down over his arm, holding whatever that is. So that's pretty much how I painted it. Just a suggestion of something that looks sort of like a towel holding something in his hand. I don't know, but that's how I painted it. So again, one of the main reasons I picked this was I wanted to work on the people, these small figures of people, and I really like how these people came out. They're very loosely done, but yet, you know, they're people. You look at them and go, wow, you know, there's a bunch of people there, and I really like how that looked. I was happy with it. And here I am putting on the finishing touches of some of these glass window panes in the background, and I think they came out looking nice. You can tell, you know, from a distance. You say, oh, that's some glass. That's good. So that's what I wanted. So here is another French cafe scene that I did, and I hope you enjoyed watching this. I hope it wasn't too long for you, and if you like what you see, make sure you like and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions or comments about any future paintings or anything in particular you want me to do, then let me know, and I will make sure that I get to that. And thank you very much for watching. Again, you can see my artwork on sale at www.kennethbrant.com. I invite you to visit my website and take a look at it, and let me know what you think. All right, thank you very much. Goodbye.